This conference will now be recorded.
Happy
So,
New Year.
so I was up today with the hardware interface, but I actually don't have much new to share. Because my notes in here were that, sure, I think I had notes down at the bottom, yeah. Or that we wanted to sort of do a top-down approach for the logical interface, and that was like the big part that was missing from this, and that's sort of dependent on what we need for attestation first.
Nate, I believe there was also an agenda item to discuss the release work in progress document from DMTF for MCP security.
I have a really difficult time hearing Yuval, I think, is talking. I have a tough time hearing it come through. I don't know whether it's just on my end or whether everyone else can hear clearly.
No, it's hard to hear for me too.
Oh, let me try. Is it better now?
That's better, yeah. It's still a little muffled.
Maybe I should try to reconnect for some GoToMeeting issue, just to be on the safe side, okay?
Okay.
Can you hear me now better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. So I believe we had an action item on the agenda to discuss the work in progress document regarding MCTP security from DFDF.
I think that happened just before we broke for the new year. I think it happened in early December. I don't know if there was a follow-up beyond that.
Yeah, because on the previous time, you said that there was no sufficient material in the document, if you recall. And now there is an updated version, which is more detailed.
Okay.
Yeah. So that actually gets to the other meeting agenda item today, which is fleshing out our 2019 agenda. And it looks like we have Jeff up for next week to talk about DMTF again.
Ooh.
I think.
I'm happy to go on the 29th to up with a revision of the attestation document.
I tried to look actually this week for this file for the agenda, and I did not see a link on the wiki page to this file. Can someone edit?
A link for this spreadsheet, is it?
Yeah, because the meeting's agenda is not shown on the wiki page.
Yeah, I had to wander around to find it. It was in a weird place.
Okay, I'll update the wiki page to add it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nate.
All right, here, I'll add a link to this into the chat though, so everyone can go to it now. All right. And then, so we did talk about the platform's root of trust in our sort of as a new section added to the top level doc. We're still looking for volunteers to take that section on though. So do we have anyone who would like to do that? Let's see if anyone added themselves to the main doc. Oh, looks like we have Waj Tech on the main doc.
For a platform root of trust, is it?
Yeah, here, let me pull that up as well. So is anyone else interested in working on that?
I can reach out to him and talk with him. He can put me down. I'll talk with him, see what he's got in plan. Was there any notes from the previous discussion, or is that a placeholder?
Let's look.
Oh, a blank sheet.
You appear to have a blank slate.
Perfect. I love a blank canvas. All right.
Hey, Nate, Prabhu here. Could you please add me to that list as well? I will work with WatchTech internally.
All right. I was gonna say you can add yourself to anything on here. You should have edit privileges.
Okay, sounds good.
So is 2 weeks going to be enough time to actually get anything into there, or should we push that back? Elaine, do you want to go on the 22nd?
You know, I can connect with him today and see, and if not, Nate, we could probably. I did still have a couple of opens from the secure boot that I wanted to close out on. So if it is a problem for the platform root thrust stuff, we could switch secure boot into that slot later today. I can go and do that after we talk with him.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, just send me an email and let me know
what's happening. Okay.
Yeah. Put secure boot down here just in case.
So at some juncture too, Nate, we do have to, I think, release draft specs to the incubation committee, right?
Yes. I'm not sure exactly what a due date is for that. Here, is Michael still on? Yeah. Michael, do you have any guidance on like when the committee would expect a draft of anything?
That is a bit of a loaded question. One hard and fast rule is that we do want final drafts prior to presentation to the committee. But outside of that, I'm probably the wrong person to answer that. I would want to bring Archna in before I say anything that might be incorrect.
Archna had said last year at January of this year, this month.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, that's clearly not going to happen that soon, but it's definitely makes us want to go faster, a lot faster.
Right. If we're not going to meet that deadline, then I think we should communicate with her, and I can bring her in on that and just let her know the situation. So if that is going to cause an issue, she can be aware. Chances are we'll probably stretch things out.
I mean, I think it would be helpful at some point maybe to just have a discussion about just taking a step back, the big picture of like what is it we want to deliver? I mean, is there going to be ultimately coming out of the current documents like a single spec? Multiple specs? I mean, do we actually have a crisp idea of how many specs we're going to produce? Or, and so on.
Yeah, well, that can be a good discussion for now. So I guess we could either merge everything into one sort of giant specification, or we could release it as sort of each section as its own specification, and then have sort of one overarching document that calls out all these individual specifications. Does anyone have?
I mean, it's some, some of what we have in some of the documents is kind of like recommendations, like, I don't know if it was which one I'm thinking about, but, it was kind of like guidelines, and so I guess as far as overall goals, I mean, it seems like at least one goal is, I think, that if a device vendor, somebody builds a PCI card to plug into a standard system, that the attestation of that card can happen, right? I mean, whatever interfaces, protocols, mechanisms are needed to allow one person to produce a card that the system can attest to, that seems at least like one goal. I mean, with the platform root of trust, which is, I guess, this more central device that's on a system that does the attestation or kind of, goes through a sequence during boot. I mean, I guess how standard that gets, I guess, I don't know if we've agreed on that. But I don't know, I guess to me, like just kind of some of the overall goals are a little fuzzy. I mean, what our goals are is to provide just general guidance points that people can take and do with what they want, or, where is it we need hard specs that you must do this, you must do that, in order, to achieve some goal we have.
So I would like to see sort of the individual sections turn into more sort of lists of things you have to do in order to be secure. So less of a recommendation and more of a like here is the bare minimum set of things that you have to do in order to be a secure system. So I guess we could start trying to implement the right things in the like should or shall language to sort of show what things are mandatory, what things are good but optional.
Yeah, I would second that, Nate. I think as long as the only, I guess one problem with keeping them separate, I mean, it happens even if they're together, is just keeping our terminology consistent. Like in the attestation document, I used early on platform as the server or the thing that's collecting all the attestations, and a device being testing, the devices that are trying to assert that they're good guys, right? So, if we use, it's things like that, making sure our vocabulary and terminology is consistent. I think we could keep them separate. It would be a lot easier to have them separate for sure.
All right, well, it sounds like a glossary would be a good thing to have.
Yes. Yeah, so I didn't ever finish it. I have a glossary, but I can put some more in it and fill it out. If we want to keep, I don't know, it seems like attestation is far enough along that we can stick stuff in there. We can always put it somewhere else if you prefer. We can make a glossary as completely separate, and then somebody else could handle it.
Yeah, I say you seem to already have a lot of stuff to do, so I don't want to pile more into attestation, since
Yeah.
I kind of already did that with the hardware interface.
Yeah, so if we had a project-wide glossary, I have one section 22 of attestation, but it's just a list of terms. There's nothing in it. I mean, there's no definition there.
Right.
You could yank that out if somebody wants to pick that up.
Yeah, I can help work on a glossary just to sort of define consistent terms for everyone. And it should probably be kind of a group effort, just sort of look at terms you're using and define them in the glossary, sort of as you end up making up new terms for things.
Yeah, I like that idea. It can grow on its own.
Yeah, I mean, it can also help if people, even if everyone just defines the terms as they use them in their doc, that can make it way easier to sort of find and replace, to homogenize all the terminology.
Yeah, I think if we don't do that, we're going to get people very confused.
Right. Well, I will create a new doc for that, and I'll also add a link to that to the wiki.
All right, and when you do, I'll remove this section in attestation and just put a link instead.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.
One other possibility would be to try to come up with, as much as I hate it, but from a project management point of view, some kind of dates that we can target. So we can at least see where are we on this timeline.
All right. All right. So right now it looks like we are booked until February 5th. So do we want to set a deadline shortly after February 5th and as like a checkpoint for when we want to sort of have a rough draft ready?
Yeah, so how, what is our process here? So I can probably edit attestation ad nauseum, like it'll, it's one of those documents that the more you work on it, the more you work on it, right? So we
Like
just
with attestation, I mean, have we decided on the protocol we're going to use, or is that still an open question? Because I think we surveyed some of the different ones that are out there, if I remember. I mean, but was there a decision about what the protocol is yet?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, like you said, there were a number of candidates.
Well, do you, I guess when can we decide that, and then how long do you think it would take to actually do a write-up once one is chosen?
Yeah, why don't I target that January date instead of being just generic attestation? Let's call it protocol decision or discussion and decision. And then I'll just focus on that, on documenting the various ones, and make a recommendation on which one to do. And there's multiple protocols, of course. So the one that I'm thinking of is the plain old, let's see, we've got a bunch of them. Ownership provisioning is not the one that's most important in this. It's probably 11.5 interrogation and enrollment, I think, or 11.6, which goes as part of 11.5. See, how do we separate these? There's 11.5, 11.6, and 11.7, all of which are relevant. Are you in the document? Oh, you go in there, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was in the scoping doc and not the real doc.
That's fine. So if we go to 11.5, because they all come about at different times. We discussed factory for a while. That one's not a big deal, but one is, so 11.5 is if I'm the platform, what are the devices inside of me or associated with me? And that's, like it says, it's interrogation. The 11.6 is included. It's sort of it's subsumed by 11.5, right? Or it happens later after it's already interrogated and enrolled. Like this device says, I know what I have now because I did this interrogation step. And now at 11.6, this says, okay, well, if I'm talking to you at any point later, I need to make sure it's still you, right? And then 11.7, if you scroll down a little bit, 11.7 is when it's actually sending out its measurements, right? So they're all related. One is what's out there. The first one is what's out there. The second one is, well, how do I know it's you? And the third one is, what are you running? And I think the question is, I guess they're all three. We just have to do all three, but they're.
Do the existing attestation protocols, I guess we're considering, kind of cover all these, all these cases that you're talking about?
In bits and pieces, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, they do. But they're not all the same. Like the discovery one, just what's out there, but it doesn't really care. It's just collecting information, right? Well, I guess unless someone has advice, I'm just going to have to go through them all, and it may end up that it's just one protocol. I don't like it being just one protocol though, because I think that first discovery one is important, and it's maybe discovery plus authentication combined.
But I think that the discovery would tell you a little about the part. So there's kind of two levels of discovery: just probing what's out there, discovering its capabilities, and then attaining its identity. And I think they could be separate. They could also be wrong. There's kind of levels. I guess there's levels to discovery.
Yeah, it does seem like sort of discovery and like you can't just blindly believe what something says it's there though. So I think discovery is also tied in with authentication pretty tightly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of a device saying, okay, I'm, whatever this device is, and I came from vendor, I'm this device, and I came from vendor D. Now you decide if you want to let me in. There's one, you could let them in based on identity, period, or you could let them in based on identity plus an attestation.
I mean, an attestation, I think, is mandatory. If you just let anyone in who claims to be a specific thing, that's very easy to fake.
Right. So if you think of a TPM, for example, you can make it attest that it is, provide its certificate and do a challenge and response and make sure that it is a real TPM from a specific vendor. But that still involves an attestation, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the attestation of the device is mandatory when you're trying to figure out what it is and whether or not it's trustworthy.
Yeah, so then it sounds like we're going to have to marry all these three things into one. They're separate functions, but they're intertwined. The only one I could see that would be separate would be 11.5. It says, what do you think you've got out there? And you don't necessarily trust it after 11.5. You're just doing a survey, sort of. And then authentication and attestation go from there. We could divide it that way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. As you can, 11.5 is just figure out what things exist in the system, but keep them all untrusted until you actually authenticate and attest to them being what they say they are.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
and
makes
then you've got the other two combined. So that works. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, that works.
I guess is the entity that's doing the attestation, that's querying the devices, that's what we were calling the platform root of trust? Is that
Yeah, that's the platform. Yeah, that's the platform.
And I guess when that happens during boot, is that, I don't know, something like, I guess, when does that happen? When a system's powered on, when does this attestation sequence happen? Yeah, and I guess, for example, on a server that's, running UEFI, is this before you get to UEFI, presumably, or is it's not the OS doing it, I would assume, right? Or like what entity does the attestation?
it would have to be before UEFI, because otherwise, PCIe cards could run random UEFI modules before you've attested to them being safe.
So this is a pre-UEFI phase. Yeah. Okay, which makes sense to me.
Certainly before your OS.
If you have an OS.
Yeah, and in our case, we don't have UEFI, so it's our early boot, I guess.
Even better. Be more secure already.
Yeah, should we start saying, pre-nerf instead of pre-UEFI?
Well,
I don't know how many people are familiar with the nerf project.
what's nerf?
Linux boot.
Oh, okay, I didn't know it was called nerf.
Yeah, apparently Linux boot is taken, right?
Oh, so they had to call it something else.
Yeah, it's another OCP project for under secure booting, and trying to get rid of UEFI and other sort of opaque binary blobs that run at boot time.
Yeah, this is the Ron Minnick thing, right?
Yep.
Nate, so is your hardware interface, pinouts and so on that you were describing, I mean, is that the entity that does this querying of the devices? Or, I mean, I guess, is that a hardware spec for, a security chip that can do that is the platform root of trust? Or what's the scope of your hardware interface?
Yeah, the plan is that would be the hardware root of trust for the whole platform. And yeah, it wouldn't necessarily need to be a dedicated chip. Like this could also be embedded into the BMC maybe, or some other sort of central chip that's already being used. But right
Okay.
now, lots of this functionality doesn't exist yet inside of BMCs, and so it's probably faster to have it as a separate chip. I mean, that's how Microsoft and Google have done it as a separate chip already.
Right.
And yeah, the idea is to make that a common chip footprint so that anybody can make a chip that matches that footprint, and it'll electrically work in any system designed to have that as a hardware root of trust.
I mean, in our direction, we would want that to be on the BMC, and then on the open BMC, and then the really work on battening down the hatches on the open BMC so that it becomes trusted, which it isn't right now yet.
Yeah, in our case, that would go essentially between the BMC and its flash, so it can authenticate the BMC's flash and make sure that the BMC is running trusted signed code. So that sort of improves trust in the BMC, but doesn't fix any of the runtime vulnerabilities, of course. Just means it's running, signed and attested runtime vulnerabilities.
Do we have one of our IBM folks is on the OCP, the team that's working on open BMC security? Is there anybody else that spans both projects, this one and that one?
I work with like Nancy Wen from Google is also heavily involved in OpenBMC. And I'm in the same building as her, so I talk to her regularly. And Ben Stoltz, who has been periodically showing up and talking with me, is also sort of peripherally involved in that.
I see. Yeah, I think we're going to overlap. At least we need some to be sure that what we're doing works for them and vice versa. I think we're ahead security wise, but we have to make sure we feed into there.
Yeah, same with the Linux boot is also fairly related to our secure boot.
Yeah, you're right.
They're sort of, well, right now I think they're mostly complementary because, whether you're attesting or authenticating a Linux boot image or a UEFI image, I don't think particularly matters to us. It's just a signed binary blob. So it's sort of, they're complementary more than dependent on each other, I think.
Yeah, I think the only place that, or one big place will be, how does the platform root of trust map onto the OpenBMC if it's running in that capacity, right?
Yeah, our platform root of trust just holds the BMC in reset while it does all of its like scanning of the flash. So we sort of decouple them in that we just don't let the BMC out of reset until we're done making sure its flash is what we expect it to be.
I see. But you don't trust the BMC. I mean, we don't trust the BMC now either, but the hope is that we can later. So then, okay. So your platform root of trust is separate, but it would be helpful if the BMC could become the platform root of trust.
Yeah, I think so.
So Nate, in your case, when your device is, I guess trying to say authenticating your platform root of trust is authenticating a device. I mean, what physical signals are you using, like say to a PCI card or some device to do that? Is it is it I2C or SPI or some other bus type or?
It's generally SPI. There are a couple exceptions. Some devices, like CPLDs, for example, don't usually have external flash. It's all internal. And so for that, you generally have to use JTAG or something like that to be able to read the internal flash contents. But yeah, generally it's sitting as a bump in the wire on the SPI bus. So Cerberus does the same thing, where the root of trust just sits in between the device and its SPI flash, and can read the entire contents of the flash and prevent writes from going through to the flash and stuff like that.
Okay, so there's a chip on the device itself too. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or between flash and. But then how does the root of trust, the platform root of trust, talk to the PCI card? Is it also SPI? I mean, I understand that there's a bump in the wire between the processor that's going to be executing out of flash and flash, but between the platform root of trust and the device, there's some communication, right? That happens.
Yeah. So.
And is that is that also SPI?
No. So the Cerberus specification has, I believe it's an I2C tree to go out to all the different root of trust devices in the system, and a manifest to know,
Right.
what it's expecting and what its, attestation values should be and all that.
Right. What do you
So
guys
that's
do?
all over I2C. Your option, yeah, when you get to PCIe cards, you're really limited to either going through PCIe or I2C are basically your only options. There are some unused pins in the PCIe spec but different people have commandeered them for different things, so you can't really rely on those for anything.
Okay.
So yeah, did that answer your question?
I think so, but I guess so then, if something like a BMC wanted to authenticate a PCI device, I mean, it's not going to be able to access, PCI config space, I don't think. But it could use I2C, I guess.
Yeah, I2C is probably the way to go. So you could have like I2C talking directly to the root of trust on the PCIe card.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, are we gonna like specify that kind of stuff somewhere? I mean, just some of that more bigger picture of how. I mean, maybe that belongs in the platform root of trust section, I guess. You know, some of those, I don't know, assumptions or notes about, you know, how communication happens between these different entities, and what bus types being used and so on.
Yeah. We also, so there is also a section sort of up at the top for just overall security architecture that I think is so far blank, but that would be another place to sort of put system level architecture notes of sort of
Right.
how I sort of see that as how all these sub pieces fit together. And then, you know, the registers and things like that that are available on the I2C interface would go in my hardware interfaces doc. And we're sort of relying on Elaine, to say what she needs for attestation to occur, to help figure out what to put into the registers.
That goes back, I think it was Stuart's question earlier, which is, what are we going to deliver? Is it, are we delivering like generic specifications or something really specific like build this adapter with these connections and these, I don't know, these buses, and describe everything in detail? How far are we going?
So we maybe don't need to call out the specific physical interfaces. Like, you know, there might be different or better ones available in later PCIe specifications, and you don't want to be in the business of having to update the spec every time there's a new interface available. So it might be good enough to just say, you know, a physical interface connecting to these chips, and then specifying, you know, what information, like specifying the register map inside the chip that has to be available over whatever physical interface you're supplying.
Like, I mean, I guess Brian and Nate, I mean, for you guys with Cerberus and Titan, I mean, right now, you're going to have, if you want a NIC card that's compatible with Cerberus, you know, there's a Cerberus compatible NIC card somebody has to create, I assume, and likewise for Google. And so, I mean, is the goal to have a third party produce one NIC card that can then, you know, electrically and et cetera, you know, be attested? I mean, you know, so if that's the goal, then you would have to agree on like, well, it's going to be I2C and enough detail, at least whatever it would take to allow somebody to produce a device that you can plug in a slot and it'll attest.
Yeah, that is the end goal.
Okay. So I don't know how specific that, to Lane's question, how specific that means we have to get, but probably fairly specific, at least at the interface that a device, I'd say PCI devices at least, you know, would use. Pluggable devices.
I mean, that would certainly fit with OCP's charter, right?
Yeah, that. All
right. I see it could be a couple of different ways. I think devices have to be able to if we just take the physical interface away for a second, I think fundamentally we want devices to be able to attest to their authenticity and their integrity. And then from there, when you plug in interfaces, what interfaces do you communicate with to the device? In some configurations, PCIe card, there's PCIe that goes on there. I think Adrian and Intel have done some good work attesting to a device's identity and integrity over PCIe. And there's some commonality with how we do that in Cerberus for systems that maybe don't have a host processor. And although we have devices in them that have PCIe interface, that interface is really a device-to-device interface, as opposed to back to a root port on a host processor. So it's how do we attest to these devices? Or for the example somebody gave earlier, where you've got a chassis with a BMC and a bunch of M.2s or a bunch of other devices. How do you attest to their authenticity and integrity? And Nathan is correct. The two common interfaces that are going to be there are I2C, which goes over to PCIe connector. It's as a standard definition, part of the PCIe spec, and PCIe. So the I2C is primarily there on these components for out-of-band monitoring from a baseboard management controller to understand the temperature requirements of the component and be able to drive fans and do some out-of-band diagnostics, whether it's firmware update or whatever other advanced features the device might have over I2C. And then PCIe, of course, is the data plane into the device for its primary functionality. So I think in capturing those two devices, if there's an attestation protocol that can go over either interface, then I think that is valuable because it captures a wider array. If you have the Cerberus Titan platform root trust, then you can go in over I2C and test devices. If you don't have that, then maybe later in your boot you take a little bit more risk, but maybe later in your boot you can establish that same attestation through PCIe. So I think fundamentally, if the protocol can go over, if the same protocol can go over different interfaces, then there's a lot of benefit to that. It provides flexibility to the platform. At least that's my thoughts on the attestation protocol.
And then you're suggesting that we don't do the physical authentication.
I would say we would still do the physical as a reference, but in doing the physical, I would try not to limit it to a certain interface and say, hey, because not all devices are going to be connected. Or if we try to say your device must have this interface, then I think from that position you're probably limiting, excluding some devices. So, for example, if you must have a PCIe device, what happens if it's a SATA or a SAS connected device? if it has to have an I2C. I think I2C is probably pretty common, but at least for I know for us, I2C is pretty common due to just how we do some of our thermal management. With or without host processors, we've always got that I2C.
Yeah, and that would not be the same for us.
I see. So you'd have PCIe.
Yeah.
So there you go. You don't want to exclude the stuff you're doing from the stuff we're doing due to the physical interface, but we should give some examples of how that physical interface, how the protocol can work over different physical interfaces. I2C could be one, PCIe could be another, maybe there's more.
How would you do a GPU?
For its attestation?
Yeah.
Over primarily over I2C for its firmware attestation, and then later on there's other registries that we would lock down. So the GPU would interface with a lot of them interface PCIe and of course I2C. You have to have the I2C there, at least in our configurations for terminal management.
Your audio. Yeah, Brian, your audio just completely died. So I muted you because it got really loud and scratchy.
Sounds like multiple people are having problems.
Yeah, other people's audio seems fine. It's just Brian's that got super scratchy.
Oh, okay. I couldn't
Is
tell
mine
who's
okay?
talking. Yeah, you sound fine.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Jonathan. This is the first time I joined this call. I had some audio problems with my computer, so now I'm calling through the phone. So I just joined Facebook. I work with Sahia. I heard that the firmware and the security are very tightly related. I'm actually in the firmware team. So I joined both the security project and the firmware project. So I can help to be a bridge between the two projects.
All right, great. Sounds good. And welcome to the project.
Yeah, thanks.
And Jonathan, what company do you work for?
Within Facebook, I'm in the hardware group, but I work on the firmware.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I actually, beginning of last year, I went to Google for the ARM conference. I was working on ARM firmware for an ARM vendor. So actually, Ned gave a speech over there. While I was working on the firmware, actually, sometimes I see Brian Kenny's name, because our two companies had collaborations, my previous employer and Microsoft. So I'll be happy to help out to relay information between these two projects.
Thank you. That's real helpful.
Thanks. Be glad to.
All right. Well, it looks like we are at the end of our time. Sorry, today's meeting was a little all over the place, but I think it was actually pretty good to talk about more high level stuff for a bit. And just for the meetings coming up, Jeff is up next week with the DMTF stuff, and then either WodgeTech is up on the 22nd, or maybe Brian is up on the 22nd, depending on what'll be available.
Hey, before we go, the discussion on the 29th, Elaine, do we have a concise list of the things that we're going to be reviewing, the protocols?
Not yet.
Okay, so you're going to send that out in email, is that right?
Yeah, I'll have to send it out in advance so that you can review before the call.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good to do. All right, cool.
Okay.
I don't know if well, I guess, do we do straw polls here first, or do we do, we're just going to make a decision there and bang, done?
I'm happy to if you want to send me any input, please send it. I'll come up with a presentation on what the choices are, and we'll just have to figure it out over the phone, I guess.
Does the OCP group have a straw poll mechanism built into it?
Not built in. When I've sent out polls before, I just make a Google form that everyone can fill out. So
Okay.
I'm happy to do that again as well if that'll help in advance to sort of collect opinions.
And the voters for the thing are just whoever's on the call or something like that, or whoever happens to be. I guess whoever's listed on the email list. Is that right?
Yeah, I just send it out to the whole mailing list and let the opinions roll in.
Yeah, that's a good idea, though. We don't have any place to do like online recorded, typing discussions, do we? Some kind of poll with a, I don't know, discussion area would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that'd be valuable. Like this is like the first one we're doing, isn't it? From its decision perspective.
Yeah, it is. Bleeding edge. We'll have to ask OCP for the infrastructure to do it, huh? Good question.
Yeah, people can also comment on any of the docs that anyone's writing. So if you have specific comments on any particular attestation protocol, just add a comment to the doc.
Okay, so I guess that's probably the best thing, Elaine, and just put the options in a document on
and then
the
we'll
wiki
just
yeah, right.
But you do bring up a Robert's Rules of Order question, which is, what is our voting mechanism? Because what if we don't all agree? So then, how do we determine which it should be?
Right.
I don't know what OCP's rules are there. Is it simple majority or what? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Well, we have time to find out, but maybe Michael can answer that later.
I mean, if we really got to the point where, there's kind of half on one side, half on the other side, that probably wouldn't be a good vote to move forward with, because you don't want to, unless people, especially people really strongly disagree or something, but hopefully we can just come to a consensus and it's not like.
Yeah, I think we can reach consensus, at least majority consensus, and then block anybody remaining.
Right. Mike is pretty messed up still.
I think I heard the words majority consensus. Um, yeah, all right. I'll talk to Michael and see if they have any particular guidance on that. But yeah, I mean, I agree that if we have sort of half the people with strong opinions one way and half the strong opinions the other way, we should probably just find somewhere to meet in the middle and not, alienate the opinions of half the group.
Right.
All right. All right. Well, I'll email Michael and ask if they have any like straw poll mechanisms available to us as well, since that would also be handy. And then Elaine, if you write up the attestation protocols you're considering, I can make another blank document if you want, for people to be able to comment on.
All right. I think it would probably fit in the one we have, and yeah, I can comment in there.
Yeah, so if you make a new heading, you can provide a link to people directly to that heading.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, so if you look, if you click on a specific heading, it adds a little hashtag to at the end of the document link. Let's see if there's an example of one. Yeah, so there we go. So like if I click on the 11.6 up at the top, it gives an extra hashtag to that specific heading, so you can send people straight to your protocol lists and they don't have to scroll down.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's cool. Neat. All these tricks in Google Docs. We still don't have a way to do the references, right? The table and the references. There was something in there. Remember, there was a comment on how to do cross-referencing within the document.
Yeah, you can cross-reference to a heading. I don't know of a way to cross-reference to a table or an image, though.
Yeah, because figures, right? That was a question a long time ago. How do we how do we make figures and cross-reference to them?
Yeah, there's also still no way to add a caption to a figure.
Mm,
So that's a little annoying too.
yeah.
But hey, it's things I can file bugs about and then go annoy the Google Docs team.
Thank you. Good.
So do that too.
Captions and cross-references to figures.
All right, anything else for today? Or we're 8 minutes over. So let's wrap up and see everyone in a week.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, bye. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
You too.
Bye.